Hey, welcome to this episode of the Note Closure Show. As always, Scott Carson, jacked up to be here with today. A couple of days ago, we did an episode on the most distressed cities of America. It's actually based on an article that WalletHub had come out last week, late part of February, talking about where the most distress was. You know, the top 100 cities in America. And I was really surprised about how Texas had all of our major markets, Houston was the number 3 one all across the country, actually number 2 across the country. And then we had Austin was in there, Dallas, Plano, Fort Worth, Laredo, Corpus Christi, San Antonio. That was really kind of surprising to me that for a state that supposedly has one of the greatest GDPs, greater than most countries, we've got a lot of distress. And it has nothing to do with what's going on the border. Okay, this is all about number of bankruptcy filings, the number of defaulted accounts, people searching for debt or loans, reduction in credit scores and stuff like that too. So it's a really interesting article. I highly encourage you to click on the link in the description here and go back and read the article to surprise you about it. But today's episode is a switch in this. It's the cities that are in distress, the states that are in distress. Now, I'm not going to go through every state. You can look at the article, read it yourself, but I am going to talk about the top 10 states. Now, Washington, D.C. is thrown in there, and I don't consider Washington, D.C. a state. That's a city more so than anything else. So you can check that out. But let me, I wanted to share my screen so if you're watching the video, you can actually kind of follow along and see what I'm talking about. Now, the great thing about this is it's pretty simple to go in. So it literally talks about the states of the most financial people in financial distress. And we all know about that. People have struggled. Inflation's kicking everybody's asses, okay? And they're basically 9 key metrics. Factors like the average credit score, the change in the number of bankruptcy filings between September of last year and September of 2022, and the share of people with accounts in distress. And you can go into the article more so and be specifically, but the main findings, let's just start with this. Now, number 1 overall didn't surprise me at all because really state 1 and state 2 both have been leading the nation as far as the number of mortgage defaults for the last year or two. It's the Gulf Coast. Louisiana was one of the hardest hits with COVID and still struggling. Louisiana was number 1 overall. Mississippi was number 2. I mean, Mississippi's rather the biggest city in Mississippi is Jackson, which is the only city that has over 100,000. But there are some good parts, and there's also some real rough parts. Mississippi's kind of a poorer state. Number 3, the Lone Star State, Texas, is what surprised me on this. That kind of is not reassuring, but it doesn't surprise me if we have seen the amount of foreclosures, number of distress notes starting to creep up here. Okay. Number 4 was very surprising. Tennessee, as much as the big boom in their technology, Nashville is running away, just very similar like Austin. But Tennessee was number 4. 5 is Nevada. Not necessarily so much of a surprise with Las Vegas and Reno and gambling, stuff like that. 6 is South Carolina. 7 was Alabama. Crimson Tide fans are struggling over there, just like everything else. 8 was the District of Columbia, but I don't really count that. I count that as a city. So technically, Georgia was number 8 city overall. 9 was Kentucky, and 10 was Oklahoma. Oklahoma. So those were the states. And if you look at the map here that they shared, you can see the darker area here. The Southeast Conference, for the most part, is difficult. New York, obviously, is doing poorly. New York actually came in and ranked as number 13. California ranked 30th, which was a surprise. What's another state on here that kind of surprised me? Illinois ranked 28th, which that was surprising because Chicago ranked so high in distress lift. I'm sorry. Illinois ranked 21. Sorry, Indiana was 28. But Florida, God's waiting room, which has, as of just a couple of days, reported about the areas that have the states that have the most distressed listings as far as real estate listings, where they're motivated sellers, stuff like that. Florida, God's waiting room, ranked 20th overall as the state with the most amount of stuff. Now, we all know there's a lot of Airbnb issues across the country, a lot of people that bought real estate for that purpose. It's been oversaturated. Cities are changing things up, that kind of stuff. Hawaii, which for as distressed as it was during COVID, how it's not rebounded, and even everything going on with Maui and stuff like that, came in at 26. Okay. So those are some surprising. Now, what they did was they basically an in-depth look at the most financially distressed states. Now, Louisiana is a state, and I'm just going to literally read this from the articles, a state where people are in the most financial distress, which makes sense given that it's extremely vulnerable to natural disasters like floods, hurricanes, and has the second highest poverty rate in America. Around 11.6 of the Louisianans have a credit account where they have temporarily been allowed to not make payments due to the financial difficulty, which is the highest percentage. So basically 1 out of 9 individuals is in a forbearance plan or deferred payment plan on their credit accounts, okay? Beeline up payments unfortunately hurts people's credit scores. In the Bayou State, the average credit score in Louisiana is 642. That's the third lowest in the country. That's only just above the threshold of fair credit of 640. Interestingly, Louisiana's next door neighbor is next to it in the rankings as well. What's next door to it? Mississippi, okay? And then, of course, the other neighbor, Texas, is number 3. But Mississippi, the state, is the second most financially distressed, in part due to the fact that it's state with the highest poverty rate at over 19%, according to the latest Census Bureau data. Poverty naturally makes it difficult for people to pay their bills, and the Mississippi search Google for loans more than people in any other state. There is a sign of underlying financial problems that contribute to the state's residents having the lowest average credit score in the country at 634. That's bad predatory, but close enough to fair credit to get there with a few months of responsible credit use. Yeah, you start making payments on time, or credit score will start rising up. Okay. Now, part of that distress is that Mississippi and Louisiana have the most amount of mortgage defaults, which is the biggest detriment and causes lower credit scores faster than anything else. Okay. And it takes a little while for that to get through. Now, Texas, the Lone Star State, here's what they had to say about it. Chaos. Texas is the state experiencing the third most financial distress, which might seem counterintuitive given that Texas is the 8th largest economy in the world, okay, with a bigger GDP than most countries. Hey, Texas, let's secede from the union. You know what I mean? You keep hearing us talk about that. However, Texans are having a number of economic issues, including an increase of more than 21% in non-business bankruptcy filings in the past year, okay? Nearly 7% of the state's residents have an account in forbearance or with deferred payments too, which is the top 10 in the U.S. All right. The average credit score in Texas is in their fair credit range, though, at 661. While residents aren't in danger of slipping into the bad credit range, they still have nearly 40 points before they can reach good credit score. Now, part of that too, I think, is that Texas, we have the fastest foreclosure laws in the country. And so people, and the property's been doing good here, so people have had a lot of equity growth here. And if they can't pay their mortgage, obviously the number one thing, just sell your house. Well, not everybody wants to sell their house. So that may see why we have more increased stuff, because the foreclosure time frame is much faster, whereas versus Louisiana, Mississippi, it's a little bit longer to foreclose. And so people aren't filing bankruptcy as fast, which is really the number one high kind of get out of jail or delay a foreclosure process. Now, if we look at the change in credit scores from October 2022 to October 23, the lowest changes was Utah, Hawaii, Alaska. Yeah, it's hard to finance anything when you have snow all the time, right? Wyoming and South Dakota. Okay, that doesn't really surprise me. Yeah, your LDS, they're going to be paying on time. Hawaii, if you live there, you got to expect to pay stuff, I guess, for the most part, which that was probably the most surprising one on it. Alaska, Wyoming, South Dakota doesn't really surprise me because those states are basically almost outnumbered by cattle. Okay. The highest changes, okay, was Indiana, Arkansas, Mississippi falls in there, which makes sense. And then 50th was tied with the District of Columbia, which I counted as a city, and Iowa. Okay. So best state versus worst state 23, Utah versus Iowa was a couple of things there. Worst state was Iowa. All right, so let's change the share of people with accounts in distress. Same thing, October 22nd. I'm sorry, October 22 to October 23rd. The highest, Vermont, Hawaii, Illinois, Nevada, California. Okay. The lowest was New Hampshire, Missouri, Delaware, DC, and Iowa. Change in the average number of accounts in distress. Highest was Vermont, Hawaii, Illinois, Nevada, North Dakota. Lowest was New Mexico, Missouri, DC, Iowa, and Delaware. Changes in bankruptcy filings. All right. The highest change, DC. That kind of surprised me. Oregon. Okay. New York, Texas, and Maryland. Those were kind of surprising on that stuff. The lowest, Maine, Rhode Island, Wyoming, Vermont, and New Mexico. That didn't really surprise me, changing bankruptcy filings. And here's the thing: if you're since we're getting into the whole, voting, red states versus blue states. Red states are in more financial distress than the blue states. Okay, so the average rank of Democratic was out there was 32.6% is the average rank, and then Republican states basically are at 20.12. So maybe not such a surprise there, based on what the two political parties. Democrats want to help people in distress. Republicans are kind of more, hey, we'll take care of ourselves and go out and make some things. That's just my opinion. Don't take it as word. Okay. All right. So here we go. In order to determine which states where people are in the most financial stress, WalletHub compared to 50 states and the DC in these 6 overall categories: credit score, people with accounts of distress, average number of accounts of distress, change in number of bankruptcy filings, and debt search index and loan search index. They combine those 6 things together. So that kind of surprised me. I'm sorry. I take that back. I actually got that thing wrong after read this. So actually, Republican states had a higher ranking of 20 versus average Democratic state of 32.6. So technically, Republican states are in worse credit based on this number. They switched it up on me. So my apology on that. So the thing to keep in mind, how do you take advantage of something like that if you're a real estate investor? Well, as a debt investor, most of these states we'll take a look at. There's a few states that I won't buy distressed debts in. And if we just flip it up here, I mean, if we look at the map here, I'm not buying in California. Nevada, I'll buy in, but its neighbor Arizona came in at 36, which is kind of surprising based on the previous hat. But these blue states here, I mean, these kind of higher blue main finding ones, these are where we buy. The Big 12, Southeast Conference of the United States. God's waiting room, I think a big chunk of that distress stuff, especially distress listings, as we talked about beforehand, come from the insurance issues they've had. Also the storms, hurricanes impacted that. But I don't mind buying in Tennessee and Alabama and South Carolina and North Carolina, stuff like that. North Carolina surprisingly was at number 14, so just outside really the top 10. But there's opportunity if you know where to look. I wouldn't be buying in New York. Let's go to New Jersey. New Jersey actually came in 47th, which is kind of surprising. Usually it ranks kind of high right next to its neighbor New York, but New York came in ranked at technically number 12th as a state because DC was in there. But anyway, what do you do with this state? Well, if you're investing in these states or looking to that stuff, something to keep in mind. You're going to see more distress stuff, probably more defaults, more foreclosures, more bankruptcies, more people facing distress stuff. And this is, not only on the residential, but the commercial side. And people are struggling. It's just the state of the point of where we are in the economy. People are struggling to make ends meet. Now, obviously, this is the last 12 months. This is numbers going back to October of last year. So it's about 6 months out there, but it takes a little while for them to pull it. The city by city information was a little bit more accurate, more up to date. But I found it very, very interesting. It's something to take a look at, something to keep in mind if you're investing in these cities and states that you may need to be a little bit more flexible. It may be time to double down on some marketing, subject to deals, takeover payments, that kind of stuff. I know that's stuff that we're looking at doing as well. And really just reaching out lenders in those states. If you're buying debt, looking to invest in notes, reaching out to lenders, mortgage companies, banks in those areas. What do they have in their books that they're looking to get rid of? So it'll be an interesting ride to see what happens over the next 12 months, because an interesting article came out too that a lot of some of our bigger wigs have been selling off their stock in different places, and they may see literally like Jamie Dimon from Citibank. I'm sorry, is it Citi or Chase he works for? It's Citi actually. There's a Chase. It's Chase actually, because I used to work for Chase and Jamie Dimon are Citi, selling off a ton of stock to cash out and where the market's at. So keep in mind, I think that we've obviously got some more distress that's coming down the pipeline. This is not going to end anytime soon. And honestly, I don't think the election's going to have a big result on changing some things, no matter who you're voting for. Some people want to blame Biden. Other people want to blame Trump. I think both have had issues in different things. It goes beyond with them, but most of them want to claim the pros, but not claim the cons and stuff that's going on. So most important thing I can tell you, take care of yourself. Make sure you're probably cutting off extra expenses, extra costs, that you don't need. Start putting money away for a rainy day. It's important to do that. If you're buying distressed debts, understand that, hey, there's more inventory coming out there. This is why your days on market is going to increase. Your foreclosures may drag out a little bit, but you may also need to be a little bit more flexible on what you're doing with borrowers if you're in the lending game, whether it's a owner financing side or buying distressed debts and working with people. It's always best to keep people in their houses so you don't have to take the asset back. So be flexible. Have some empathy for people that are struggling. We've all been there. If you have not been there, then guess what? Have a little bit of grace when you're dealing with distressed borrowers. One of the most important things I can tell you is that not just because people are going through bad financial situations doesn't mean they're a bad person. Bad things happen to good people all the time. Deals get delayed. People get lost. Price of goods go up. It's hard and getting harder and harder for people to be able to put, bacon on the table and put gas in their cars. Just be empathetic for people out there and really use that this article, like I said, link in the description chat roll, and then go look at what's going on in a state by state level. And that may just actually help you out, identify some opportunities or some places to avoid. So hopefully this was helpful. Go out, take some action, everybody, and we'll see you at the top.